Why does oil always seem to run out right after a political crisis, yet somehow never runs out when the crisis fades? That single question exposes a contradiction most people never notice. Every major oil shock in modern history hits the public like a natural disaster. Prices explode, gas stations panic, inflation surges, and governments warn of shortages. But behind the scenes, the oil is usually still there stored, shipped, and accounted for. So why does fear arrive before scarcity? Why do prices move faster than tankers? And why do oil crises almost always begin with a speech, a sanction, a threat, or a war never with an empty oil field? This is the part of the oil story most people are never shown. Oil crises don't start underground. They start with decisions made by people who understand that energy is power. The moment politics enters the equation, markets stop reacting to reality and start reacting to expectations, fear, and control. Stay with this video because once you see how politics quietly pulls the trigger on oil crises, every future price spike will suddenly make terrifying sense. Oil is not just fuel, it is leverage. It moves armies, stabilizes currencies, feeds industries, and decides which nations rise and which ones fall. That's why oil has never truly been free. From the moment governments realized they could influence entire economies by restricting, threatening, or weaponizing energy, oil became a tool of power rather than a simple commodity. Sanctions, embargoes, regime changes, and strategic alliances have shaped oil markets far more than geology ever could. In this video, we're going to follow that pattern through history and show how nearly every oil crisis past and present was ignited by political decisions long before any real shortage existed. Once you understand this, oil headlines stop looking random and start looking planned. Chapter 1. Oil as a political weapon. Oil has never been just a fuel. It has always been power. From the earliest days of the 20th century, controlling oil meant controlling armies, industry, and entire economies. Nations that dominated energy supply didn't just produce fuel, they controlled the levers of modern life. Imagine the world in 1914. The United States, Britain, and Germany racing to secure oil for their militaries. Whoever could guarantee a steady flow of fuel could project power across continents. Oil became the backbone of war machines, not just factories. Governments soon realized that energy could be used to influence allies, punish rivals, and maintain global dominance without firing a single shot. This is why oil has always been political. Take, for instance, Britain's Royal Navy. By converting its entire fleet from coal to oil in the early 20th century, Britain didn't just gain speed and efficiency, it gained leverage over global trade and enemy navies. Control of oil was literally a strategic weapon. But it didn't stop there. Corporations became intertwined with politics. Standard Oil, Royal Dutch Shell, and other oil giants were not just companies. They were extensions of national strategy, shaping foreign policy decisions to secure resources. And this is the first lesson. Oil crises almost never start underground. They start in boardrooms, war rooms, and political offices. When a government wants to punish another country or send a warning, oil becomes the tool. Fear spreads faster than actual shortages because politicians understand that perception drives markets. Traders respond instantly to rumors of sanctions, conflicts, or embargoes. Prices spike, even when supply is technically stable. This pattern repeats over and over, and it is why oil markets are more sensitive to politics than geology. Modern markets may be global, but the psychology hasn't changed. Risk premiums, speculation, and anticipation mean that a political decision in Caracas, Tehran, or Moscow can ripple across the globe in seconds, long before any tanker stops flowing. Oil crises are as much about human decisions and power plays as they are about barrels in the ground. Chapter 2. The 1973 Oil Crisis, the Blueprint. If you want to understand modern oil crises, look no further than 1973. The Arab oil embargo was not caused by a geological shortage. It was caused by politics. When the United States openly supported Israel in the Yom Kippur War, several Arab oil-producing nations decided to use oil as a weapon. Overnight, they cut exports to the US and Europe. Prices quadrupled. Gas stations ran out of fuel, panic gripped consumers, and inflation soared, but the oil wasn't gone. It was still being produced in other regions and could have been rerouted if political conditions were different. The real driver was the deliberate restriction, the political leverage wielded by the producers. This crisis set a blueprint for every oil panic since. Identify a political conflict, restrict supply strategically, and let fear multiply the economic impact. Traders and markets responded even more aggressively than the actual shortage warranted, amplifying the price spike. What's fascinating is how deeply this crisis reshaped global economics and policy. The U.S., shocked by the sudden vulnerability, invested heavily in energy-independent strategies like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, domestic oil production, and fuel efficiency programs. It also forced the creation of OPEC as a permanent geopolitical player, an organization built not just for pricing, but for politics. The lesson is clear. Oil crises are rarely natural. They are carefully crafted outcomes of political strategy. Governments, corporations, and alliances understand the immense leverage that energy provides, and they use it when it serves their objectives. The 1973 crisis also taught ordinary people a psychological lesson. When oil stops flowing, even partially, the world feels like it's collapsing, regardless of actual supply. Chapter 3: Sanctions, Wars, and Modern Oil Crises. Moving into the modern era, oil crises continue to follow the same political blueprint. Iran in 1979, Iraq in 1990, Libya in 2011, Russia in 2022, and Venezuela today all demonstrate the pattern. Take Iran. The revolution and subsequent sanctions didn't stop oil production entirely, but global prices spiked because the market feared disruption. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. Again, oil didn't vanish overnight, but geopolitical tension sent crude prices soaring. Traders don't wait for supply to actually fail, they price in the worst-case scenario first. Venezuela is a perfect contemporary example. Despite possessing some of the largest oil reserves on Earth, political instability, sanctions, and mismanagement created an image of scarcity that spiked prices globally, even though the world's actual oil flows were largely unaffected. Modern crises rely heavily on sanctions and diplomacy. Oil becomes a weapon not just in war, but in negotiation. Governments can strangle economies, signal power, and manipulate markets without deploying troops. Even today, a news headline about Venezuela, Iran, or Russia instantly sends futures prices jumping, because traders anticipate political decisions that could restrict supply, not because production has already stopped. The human element, the decisions, threats, and maneuvering has replaced physical scarcity as the primary driver of oil crises. And every time, the cycle repeats. Fear spreads, markets react, and consumers bear the brunt while politicians maneuver behind closed doors. Chapter 4: Why markets panic before supply collapses. Why do oil markets react faster than actual shortages? The answer lies in psychology, speculation, and the mechanics of modern trading. Futures markets allow traders to bet on what might happen tomorrow, next week, or next month. If a country threatens to cut exports, traders don't wait for the supply to physically stop, they price the risk instantly. This creates a feedback loop. Prices spike, media reports panic, governments respond, and even minor disruptions amplify into global crises. Political decisions act like a trigger, and markets amplify the reaction tenfold. In addition, investors, hedge funds, and algorithms monitor political signals 24/7. A single tweet, press release, or hint of escalation can ripple through the system, creating volatility disproportionate to real-world supply. This is why oil crises feel sudden and irrational. Ordinary consumers are shocked when gas stations run dry or prices spike. But in reality, the markets are anticipating outcomes and pricing in fear. Every oil crisis is as much a story of perception as it is of production. The key lesson is simple. When politics enters the equation, psychology dominates supply. Fear becomes the fuel, and human decisions, the negotiations, threats, and alliances become the spark. Chapter 5: why the pattern keeps repeating. Looking at history, one thing is clear. Oil crises will never disappear because the pattern is political, not geological. As long as energy remains the backbone of global power, nations will use it strategically. Controlling oil has never been just about economics. It's about influence, leverage, and survival. Even with renewable energy slowly gaining ground, oil retains a unique ability to move markets, sway elections, and influence wars. The pattern repeats because human nature hasn't changed. Fear, power, and strategy still dominate decision-making. Politicians will continue to use energy as a weapon. Markets will continue to price in risk before reality arrives. And ordinary people will continue to pay the price in higher fuel bills, inflation, and economic uncertainty. The final takeaway is both sobering and enlightening. When oil prices spike tomorrow, it's almost never about running out of fuel. It's about running into power, politics, and human decisions. Understanding that pattern gives you a lens to see beyond headlines, to spot fear versus reality, and to understand why oil crises always start with politics and always will. So, what does all this really teach us? Every major oil crisis in history has followed the same pattern. Politics first, panic second, and real shortages, if they happen at all, come last. When gas prices spike or news headlines scream oil crisis, it's rarely about running out of fuel. It's about power, leverage, and decisions made behind closed doors by governments, corporations, and alliances that understand how to turn energy into influence. Understanding this gives you a different perspective. You stop reacting to headlines and start seeing the story behind the numbers, the strategy, the fear, and the human decisions that really move the world. And here's the thing. History shows us that this pattern will repeat. Energy will continue to be a tool, a weapon, and a bargaining chip in global politics. The next crisis could come from anywhere, but now you'll know how to spot it before panic spreads. If you found this video eye-opening, make sure to hit that like button. It helps more people uncover the hidden history behind the headlines. And don't forget to subscribe to Money Historian and turn on notifications, because we dive deep into the real stories behind money, power, and the events shaping your world. Comment below and tell us, which oil crisis shocked you the most, and why do you think politics still controls energy today? Your insight could be featured in our next video. Stay curious, stay informed, and remember, the story behind the crisis is always more important than the crisis itself.